Hey everyone, Adam Fox here, your host of the Sentinel Uncut podcast. I just wanted to invite you to give our podcast a listen. We have a great new guest this week, Brian Winter, former Army diver. Now he works for NATO doing business continuity. This guy's done it all. He's got a lot of great stories, a lot of great information to share. Tune in. You can catch us on rss.com, all the socials. Give us a follow. Thanks. All right. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Sentinel Uncut podcast. Got a great guest here today, Mr. Brian Winter. And Brian, I am so glad that you could make the time to come on, and I'm really honored that you took the time to speak with me today. Let's just jump right in here. Tell me a little bit about what you do, but mostly I'd really like to hear about your early military career and the transition from military to the civilian life. We have a lot of active duty listeners who are interested to hear that perspective. So over to you.
Absolutely. And thank you, Adam. The honor is mine. Really happy to be here this morning and support this. So Brian Winter, right? Originally from a little town called Winthrop outside Boston, Massachusetts. Joined the Army in 2006 as a combat engineer.
I didn't know that. I'm sorry. So I'm from Beverly, originally.
No kidding. Wow.
Yep. And we played Winthrop in football at least once, I think. And my dad used to live right around the corner in East Boston. And I've been to Winthrop several times to go sit at the public areas and watch the planes come in from Logan.
Oh yeah. Winthrop is right underneath Logan Airport.
Yeah, nice.
You know that big red, white, and blue water tower that you see in Winthrop? And so my father's house was right across the street from that tower.
Nice. Okay. All right. Awesome. Yeah. I had no idea we had those ties. That's
Small
cool.
World. And I actually went to Savio Prep in East Boston.
Okay.
Back when it was still open. So yeah.
so real quick, and my relatives on my father's side own a convenience store called Lanzilli's on, I think it's Bennington Street.
That's right.
Yeah. So kind of it used to be across from
an gas station right next to Dunkin' Donuts, right?
Exactly. Yes. I worked there.
Wow.
Yeah, as a teenager. So
wow.
Yeah, that's really wild.
That's amazing. Well, and you know, it's Boston when you say it's right next to the Dunkin' Donuts, because it could be anywhere exactly. Within a 50-mile radius is going to be right next to a Dunkin' Donuts.
Exactly. So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really neat. But yeah, so joined the Army in 2006 as a combat engineer. Went to basic at Fort Leonard Wood. Then I was stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky for about a year and a half. Had some fun times in Nashville. 2007 was when I got an opportunity to test so that's back when the divers were still doing the terror missions. They would go around to the bases and talk to people. One of my the master sergeant at headquarters was like, "Hey, Winter, you should go check it out." So I went to the brief that morning. It was Jeremiah Tyler. You probably know Tyler. It was him and Master Diver Boyer. They were doing the terror mission. So in the morning had the briefing. In the afternoon we did the test, right? The diver's PT test. This was right after Christmas, and I had probably not done PT in about 3 weeks. So, and I hadn't swam probably in years. Got in the pool to do the 500, and I passed it with like 3 seconds to spare. Got out of the pool, almost passed out. I was exhausted, but had enough energy to recover and finish the test. The interesting part about that was I was the only one on Fort Campbell that passed that diver's physical fitness test. So after that, did the process, reclassed, went back to Fort Leonard Wood for the second time for phase one. And as you know, that's an extremely difficult course, right? So
yes. And just walk me through phase one, what that is right now, because when I went, they were, right prior to my arrival in 97, they were taking guys or men and women from the existing prior service. and then they opened it up to the street. So I actually enlisted as a diver. That's what my contract was for. And they sent us to 51 Bravo. I believe that's what it was, which was carpentry and masonry specialist. It was a 2-month school down in Gulfport, where basically they said, you have 2 months to get ready for pre-screen. And I'm like, okay. And if you don't pass, you're not going to become a diver. You're going to stay a carpentry and masonry specialist. But that's what that was intended for. So for 2 months, I worked through it, and I made it to pre-screen, which was held at Fort Eustis. And it was these E6s. It was Gordon Alberti and Lane, and just and Haney, but they looked really old to me, and I think they were all smoking cigarettes at the time. But by the time I got to Fort Eustis, I was like, I thought I was, this is going to be nothing. They almost killed me. I've never seen a guy smoke a cigarette that looked 50 years old and then run 10 miles in that Virginia heat. I was shocked. I think we all were. So, but yeah, so what does phase one look like right now?
I mean, we could do almost a whole podcast on this. So right. I have some perspective there, right? Because not only did I go through it, but then I became the training developer for the dive field. So then I went back to Fort Leonard Wood at the end of my military career, and I got to spend a lot of time not as an actual instructor, but as just kind of an add-in. And I'll tell you, that's a lot more fun than being a student. Yeah. So they had removed that 2-month construction kind of workup to the school, which they should have kept, because that would have been really helpful within the field. But yeah, so it probably consisted of the same tests, right? You had to pass the diver's physical fitness test. You had to do the treading water with the weight belt, right? For 2 minutes with the mask and snorkel. Was it 5 minutes with both hands out of the water? You have the the name escapes me, but we have to do the drown proofing, right? So that was actually, I thought, one of the hardest parts was the drown proofing with the dead man's float, and then with your hands behind your back and then your ankles tied. For your listeners who may not be military divers, and like I said, I worked as the developer in the field, so we saw the math, right? The Phase 1 Army Diver School is the single most difficult school within the Army to pass, right? So it's an attrition rate of 9 out of 10. So 1 out of every 10 students that attends passes. It was the most difficult thing I ever did in my life. And so whenever anybody asks me, tell me about a challenge you've overcome, hands down, Phase 1 was the hardest thing. So when I went through, they were still accepting reclasses. The reclasses tend to do better than the off the streeters, just because you have your exposure to the military, right? You kind of hear the stories, you talk to, nothing really prepares you. Nothing prepares you, but you're better prepared, right? Then they kind of phased out the reclasses, and they were going with just off the streeters. When I was supporting the Phase 1, it was Woodcocks. No. Actually, there was a couple different folks. I don't know if you knew Rowley, Sean Rowley. He was he was an instructor there. Sam Winter, he was actually in my baby class. So I was in Phase 2. Brian went there in baby class. There was a Sam Winter. He's still in. He's a master diver now. Right. Chase Turner was an instructor. So Woodcocks, Woody, right? Do you know?
Okay. Oh yeah, I know him.
Blanchard, One Eye, Woodcocks. So these are some of the guys I was working with going through the course. And right, the math held up. Most of them washed out on as you know, a DOR, right? A drop on request, a Dorito. Sure. Right. Yep. Not suitable for the field, right? Reclassed to the needs of the Army. Most of them went Cap Scout. So it was really interesting getting to see it from kind of both sides of the pale. And as I said, I wasn't an actual instructor, so I got to have the most fun. I got to do all the fun stuff with the students and didn't have any like real responsibility or anything after. So it was really fun. And the hits, right? Who can forget the hits? So for your listeners, I describe it. You start where the pool descends to the deep end. You take a big breath, you go down, you're wearing a horse collar, right? A mask, a snorkel, and fins, and you swim down, and the instructors come down and help you build confidence underwater by removing all of that gear, alleviating you of that burden, spinning you around, right? Maybe a get punch, right? Right, disorient you, and then you have to find your stuff, put it all back on, swim to the end of the pool. You have to complete the swim, right? Come up to the top, take your breaths, 1, 2, 3, right? And make sure your mask only has a line of water at the bottom. There's a lot going on in phase 1. But after that, honestly, phase 2 was kind of a breeze. It was a blast.
I like how you put that as confidence building. Yes.
Oh yeah. The mask. Mask appreciation. I'm sure you remember. I actually have a video on my Instagram I can send you where we're doing some mask appreciation with the students. Where, again, for your listeners' benefit, we have them fill their mask with water, put it on, and then lay down by the side of the pool, face up, mask and face and nose full of water, doing flutter kicks and dumping buckets of water on them and hitting them with the hose and yelling and doing all kinds of fun stuff just to really create as much stress as you can. And I know this all sounds like a fun kind of torture, but the purpose is when you're underwater 100 feet, right, and something happens, you don't freak out, right? You get caught by a current, you get stuck in something, you've built that sort of Zen, right, kind of recenter, fix your problem, and go back to work. I'm sorry. You saying?
No, that's okay. And I just you're gonna give me PTSD here, but I recall the flutter kicks with the mask full, and I was 18. I was off the street. So this was a real punch in the gut for me. I'm like, what are these people doing? These people are crazy, but I actually grew to love the pool hits so much because I excelled at it. I'm not saying that I'm the most calm person on the planet, but there was something about it that I actually found exciting, and I really did. I grew to absolutely love it. So
yeah, you just let it happen, right? You just grab. Hold on.
Yeah, exactly. Hold on, and you're going for a ride. That's right. Right. So, do they still do over-unders at all?
Oh yeah, that's actually what gets most people. And so this is interesting. This is probably going to be a long podcast.
Okay.
I was back at it was Woody and I. It was a new class, and apparently they hadn't gone through that drill yet, so they had them kind of just going back and forth. So it's the bottom of a 14-foot pool, right? It's about 25 yards wide. It's not a short distance or shallow. But they seemed really happy, right? They were kind of bebopping and dancing around. I was like, okay, all right. So I got on the diving board. All right, the crossover, right? You got them on two sides. One side goes down, touch the bottom at the wall, swim all the way across the bottom, touch the wall, and come up. The top side sprints across to where the people went under, right? So it's like this conveyor belt of students going under, right? And so they go down, cross, come up. I'm going down there, I'm messing with them, making sure they stay on the bottom. And then about 15 seconds later, after they come up, the crossover, right? And so you do that about 5, 10, 15, 50 times, right? And it starts to get into their heads that this is not fun. That was one of the evolutions that I hated the most. That was the one I had to kind of conquer mentally myself, because it's just a situation where you're so like stressed, you need air so bad, and the wall's so far away, starting to get the black spots, right? And really what you just have to do is, with my buddy Bogey. We went through school together, and he's like, when I'm under, he's like, I'm so cool, I'm gonna die, right? And so just that kind of mentality of it kind of helped, because it's just like, well, you know what, I'm either gonna finish this crossover or somebody's gonna pull me off the bottom, and that's what kind of helps you get through. And it's, again, it doesn't sound pleasant. The experience is far worse to go through. But after something like that, you're what do they say? We're 10 feet tall and bulletproof, right? Especially after phase 2, you're walking around like you're kind of like you own the place. It's a really neat feeling, and to have accomplished something like that, and to be counted among a group, right, like that, such a small group. So most people don't even know the Army has divers. There's less than 500 of us between current, right, and veteran. And
Yep.
so it's really the brotherhood that's built there, just to really be a part of that is just really humbling, and it's just really great. So, and have
Absolutely.
you reach out as a I didn't even know you were a diver when you reached out. You
Yeah.
asking about EM, and I was like, all right, who's this guy? And so I'm like, oh, what? Wait, what?
Yeah.
So it's really exciting, really exciting.
Yeah. No, I'm glad we touched base. And I found your profile originally through I think you were friends with, well, one of the other divers, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then later on, it was later on when I was getting ready to do this that I'm sifting through, and I'm like, oh, let me check my Army diver contacts, and I saw that you were an EM, and I'm like, what? So that was really perfect for me, as far as just kind of finding that. And yeah, so no, I can't even begin to tell you what that did for me. Pre, Basically phase one for me in Gulfport, Mississippi, with the Navy, oddly enough, right? And then 2 weeks at Fort Eustis, Virginia, for what they called pre-screen, and then finally making it to and through dive school with that high attrition rate. It was a really big deal for me, and it did change my life. I can look back on that now, and I would agree. You had a statement in there about the um, one of the hardest things you've ever done in your life. Well, I can tell you that the pre-screen when I got to Fort Eustis was the probably one of the most physically most difficult things I've ever done in my life. And I would say mentally as well. But I was 18 years old. I didn't have that process, that resilience, that I didn't understand. Um, I was just kind of like, I'm going to take a sledgehammer to this, and go hard. Later in life, marriage, divorce, buying a home, losing a home, these are all mentally tougher things, to be honest with you. Like now that but back then, that was easily one of the most the hardest thing I'd ever done to my life up until then, and then probably for a few more years after that. So, for sure, mental and physical toughness, absolutely.
I share those other life events with you as well. Again, just to get your listeners into the mindset of what it was like, right? So you're up, probably do a 3 or 4 mile run, 6.5, 7 minute pace, right out of the gate. A lot of regular PT. So we would start PT earlier than the normal PT time, right? Than 6:30.
Oh
They'd have
yeah.
us out there at 6. And you're doing a pretty intense physical. Those are the days you're not in the pool. When you're in the pool, it's a lot worse, right? So the day starts with a 500-meter swim. They call that the warm up, right? And so you'll do a lot of the crossover evolutions. You'll do a lot. We call the pink weights, right? The 2-pound weights. So you got to tread water with your hands out of the water, 2-pound weight for 5 minutes, and that's not just you. That's everybody. If anybody drops their weight, we all start the 5 minutes over.
You start over. Yep.
The base swim. How did I forget the base swim? That's 1,000 meters on your back in the pool. And that is just a crushing. that time was, I believe, 22 minutes in the pool, but it's 21 minutes down in Florida, out in the bay where you're zigzagging. But that is just a crushing, cardiovascular event, right? All your muscles burning. And then the 10 pull-ups every time you exit and enter the classroom, right? So you get in the classroom, you do 10 pull-ups, you're leaving the classroom, you do 10 pull-ups, you go to the bathroom, you 8 counts, right? So I think we got up to 400 or 500 8 counts. So on your breaks, you had to go outside and knock out 25 or 50 8 counts, so you didn't have 1,000 by the end. A lot of that type of stuff. So when I describe it to people, every morning I woke up, my body felt like it was full of broken glass. It was just everything I hurt, all the joints, and I'm paying for it now.
You're bringing back a lot of memories.
I've had 2 spinal fusion surgeries, right? Most of my left meniscus removed. I got my shoulders got some kind of stuff going on, torn rotator cuff. So I really put my body through it, but I wouldn't take a second of it back. But I should probably return to course here.
Well, and I was going to say, how did that early military career and those experiences, especially with the challenges, the toughness that you had to have, tell me about that transition from the military to the civilian world, and how those challenges and the toughness that you had to have. How did that translate? Did it benefit you? And then just finish off with, that transition, what that looked like for you, a little bit about your education in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the benefit of going through that program is you get to be part of the Army diver community. And what we do as U.S. Army divers, especially in practice functionally, is we prepare and deploy for missions around the United States. A lot of it training, a lot of work on locks and dams. Got to do a mission out in New Mexico up at elevation in Nambe Lake. It was beautiful. But the skills that I learned, so project management, right? Program management, leadership, communication, coordination, right? What is the phrase? We plan, coordinate, and execute moderate to high risk diving missions involving $4.5 million of life support equipment and 25 personnel across the United States and overseas. Accomplish the mission, return, right, and recover and do all the paperwork. So in a lot of military units, it's typically the officers that do the planning, right, and the NCOs that execute. The dive field is different. The NCOs do the planning and then the execution. So we do all the prep work, right, the preparation, right, the equipment checks and maintenance, making sure all your folks are good, the deployment orders, right, pre-mission training, right, so you know what you're doing when you get there. Deploy, right? Bring all your stuff and your people. Go do some hoo-yah, high risk, badass stuff. Clean up after, right?
And you're souping the dive while you're there.
You're all running day to day, right? Hey, you go over there, set up red, green, standby, right? We get our compressors and tanks over here. We brought a recompression chamber, right, in case there's some, some kind of issue. So I don't know what level you attained. I didn't stay in long enough for master diver, but I was a command qualified supervisor. So I was able to take out my own missions, right? And I didn't necessarily have to have a master diver with me. That's thinking back on it, it's an enormous level of responsibility, and it takes an
100%.
enormous amount of trust, right, through and with your soldiers, from your leadership. You got people's lives in your hands, right? Every dive is at a minimum moderate risk, right? Every time you're taking a breath of compressed air underwater, you do risk a diving injury, not to mention underwater welding, hydrothermic cutting, right? Construction using chainsaws, all the stuff that we did. But to get back on point, that was a lot of good skills.
It's okay.
Those were a lot of good skills while I was in, and especially when I went to Fort Leonard Wood as the training developer. That was my first sort of introduction to the professional world, right? And so when we talk to divers, nobody wants to go to Fort Leonard Wood. It's terrible. I would recommend it for guys or gals that are in, because you really get to see what a professional networking environment is like, and that helps you develop the sort of soft skills, right, that are really valuable on the outside. So I was able to take sort of the hard-nosed, right, mission planner and execution program project management and tie it into the soft skills of working in an office, right? And how do I get point papers and plans and policies approved? How do I develop training and exercises? And Fort Leonard Wood was also great because I got a lot of opportunity to train, right? So it was shortly before that, I was using my tuition assistance for construction stuff. And then I was just kind of going through it. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then I saw emergency management as an offering from American Military University. And I was like, that's it. So that dovetails. There's a natural dovetail between the professional world of EM and business continuity and the military in general, but also like as a diver, right? So when I was at Fort Leonard Wood, I got the opportunity to take some courses that helped. One was DSCA, right? DSCA, Defense Support for Civil Authorities. Working nights and weekends with two young kids and a marriage on the rocks, right? Managed to complete my degree before I got out. So this is, what year is this? This is around 2017.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, maybe I'm getting too personal, but
no, it's okay.
The ex-wife took the kids, right, and kind of moved around and ended up back in Virginia. So I was like, I need to get back to Virginia. How do I do that? I can't. Staying in the military didn't make sense because it's going to take me to places that are farther away from my kids. Right. So I wanted to get close. So it's time to pull the trigger. It's time to get out. And so that's what I did. But I did have my degree in hand. Right. That's a major door opener. And if you're in, you have no excuse not to, right? Like, yeah, it's no fun, but it's free. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And AMU is really friendly with veterans, right? You know, it's funny. I never saw a school that said, if you stop right now, this is your grade.
Right.
So if you stop all your work right now, you get a C+, and that's not my style, but I get it.
Right.
If you're just trying to get the paper. Oh, and I don't know if you knew this or your listeners know this, and actually I don't know if it still applies, but the Pell Grant through FAFSA, as a veteran, as a student, you can use your TA, and you can also apply for the FAFSA, and the school cuts you a check. So every class you take, and I was like, how could it possibly be legal? But it is. It was Master Diver Ray Ramirez.
I know Ray.
He was the one.
Oh, yeah.
He was the one. He pulled me out to Fort Leonard Wood. He wanted me out there. He's one of my mentors. I really love Ray, Master Diver. But yeah, he was like, yeah, you can do it. And I was like, no, you can't. You can't. So I was, now I'm incentivized to take classes. So now I'm taking 2 classes.
And you're getting a stipend every time you do, right?
$1,500. Yeah. I'm like, wow,
exactly. Yeah.
I already had most of my degree done. I was a little upset that I didn't know that sooner.
Right.
That's a little tidbit for anybody listening that's still in. You can get paid.
That's useful. Yes. And now that, I think, so I was pre 9/11 GI Bill. So I got out, used all mine up, and that was it, right? But the post 9/11 GI Bill is actually a really good thing for veterans. It does allow you to use your benefits, and I had a buddy Joe who actually used his recently, and whatever extra money that wasn't going towards his education, he would also, I think he was also getting BAH, if I'm not mistaken. So really good deal there. And it does allow you to kind of go to school and at least live, have some life outside of school with the ability to maybe not work, 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Maybe you can work 20 or 30, just with that little bit of extra BAH, it does help a lot.
And you can give it to your kids. So that's what I did with mine. I had to re-enlist for 4 extra years, but as part of the re-enlistment incentive, I had 2 at the time. So I split it between them, and I tell them that's my contribution. You can get the other half from your mother or take out loans, but this is you're going to get 2 years of free school on top of $1,500 or whatever it is a month. Which is invaluable, right? In addition to any other benefits they qualify for as the children of veterans. Okay, so I'm getting ready to get out. And so, I'm leveraging my networks as much as I can. I actually, I got flown out to George Mason University for an interview. So I had my degree, right? I had the background. I was still in the process of trying to figure out how to marry my experience to something useful for the civilian world. And
sure.
I'll get there. But they flew me out and I interviewed. They took me around campus. They took me out to lunch. It was nice, but I ended up not getting selected. It's tough trying to break into a new career field in your late 20s, early 30s, right? So my background, right, I got 10 years of military experience, not really like how do I translate that to EM, right? So I started practicing and building that portfolio. And that's where I come back to the skills that I mentioned earlier: program management, project management, leadership, coordination, communication, right? Planning and executing missions, right? Being able to do things, having a background of getting things done, and a mentality and an attitude that you're going to get it done. That's really communicating that across.
100%.
So building that portfolio. I got out October 2017. So I started my terminal leave. And I was just actually at the time I was living in an RV. I had sold all my stuff and I was living in a 40-foot camper, which I really loved. It's still my favorite.
There's something to be said for that, actually. Yeah.
Loved it. Now it's a bit of a pain, but I won't go all the way down there. But so I'm just applying, right? I was like, that's my job right now is applying for EM positions, and they're kind of tough to come by. What ended up happening was I got selected for a position as a contractor with the Department of State up in DC. I was like, well, it's not ideal, right? I wanted to stay in the Hampton Roads area. That's where my ex, my kids and their mom are. But I got to get paid, right? So
yeah.
I got selected, and actually I lucked out because it was a contract where they were late on selecting the last position. So I didn't even really have to interview. They just needed somebody that met the
Awesome.
blocks, right? I had a degree, right? I had a degree. They were like, do you know how to do these things? I was like, I could figure it out before I get there. And so what happened when I was hired into a position originally as occupant emergency plans, right? And so for your EM audience, now we'll get relevant to this part of the discussion. I'll just dive in. So most emergency management offices are divided into 4 segments, right? Or some version of this. One is plans, policies, and procedures, right? So you have all the plans, you have your emergency action plans, occupant emergency plans, you have your business continuity plans, continuity of operations, COOP, all the planning stuff. So those are typically on an annual or biannual cycle. They need to continually be reviewed, right? Approved, updated, connected, new phone numbers, new emails, whatever. Then you have test training and exercise, right? And so test training and exercise is how you get good at your plans. You figure out, you validate your plans, whether or not they work, make any necessary changes. Tied to that is real world events, right? And so your real world events and your TT&E, test training and exercise, validate your plans and whether they're good or not. And then after that, you have your after action report, right? Corrective action plan process. So there's plans associated, and there's hundreds of plans associated with TT&E that aren't necessarily your office plans, right? And so there's TT&E, and then you have what's called operations. If you're in the sphere where you're in an organization that has executable action in the event of an incident, right? It typically consists of an operations center, some version of watch officers, right? You maintain situational awareness, you send out sit reps, spot reports, all that kind of groovy stuff. And this is at the federal level is a lot different than state and local, right? So the federal level doesn't typically, at least where I was, if you're in FEMA on a field unit or something, you're going to be on the ground responding. That's kind of what I wanted to do. That's not quite how my career evolved, and that's fine. But yeah, so from my positions were typically awareness, and then sort of making assessments on whether or not we should send other teams to go in and respond. And the other one's outreach, right? The fourth branch of an EM office is outreach, and it's actually it tends to be the redheaded stepchild, but it's super important, and people don't realize that what you're doing in outreach is you're communicating to your communities, right? And you're helping them with preparedness initiatives, response initiatives, recovery, right? You're helping them develop their personal plan. There's also your teams, right? So business continuity, you have your continuity teams, right? You have your continuity response team, you have your reconstitution team, your devolution team, right? All these different teams, and you need to communicate with them. And your organization writ large, right? So I would send out emails to Department of State, higher ups at the assistant secretary level to down about things that are going on. And it's really building brand recognition, right? Awareness, and really like, how do you demonstrate value to the communities and organizations you work for? What all this great work you're doing, how does that translate into something that they can use or that?
Sure.
Those are all the branches of an office. I say all that to come back. I got hired to do originally the facility, they call it a FEAP, Facility Emergency Action Plan, but really it's an OEP, right? An occupant emergency plan. Something happens in the building. How do you alert? How do you notify? What do they do? Where do they go? Right? You have your rally point coordinators, right? So a big giant building, everybody goes outside. You have people outside that help them rally the offices, take accountability, and do all that kind of stuff. And then your floor wardens, right? They're kind of the bell ringers. They go through, hey, yep, something's going on. You got to get out. And everything that goes along with that, right? So that was what I was originally hired for. That's not what happened. I got shunted into the business continuity aspect. So the Department of State has roughly 30 or 40 different bureaus. It may have changed since then. There's been a lot of reorg in the government lately, which is a whole other topic. But I was tasked to help all of these different bureaus help develop business continuity plans. And what a business continuity plan is and I've done, when I describe it to people, emergency response is how you survive the incident, right? Business continuity is how you keep the mission going, right? During the
event, right? Sure.
Two totally different, very, very much married, right? Very much synthesized. But business continuity is a whole professional portfolio, right? A whole professional program tucked underneath what I consider, right, the EM umbrella.
Got a question about that. How do you measure the success of a continuity of operations program? In other words, it's really difficult to pretend that your entire organization has been exposed to a cybercrime, or that your infrastructure, your physical infrastructure, is under is falling down because of a bombing or a natural disaster. What are some of those things that you try to plan for? What events do you try to plan for, and how do you really test those without them actually happening?
Really great questions. To me, the only metric of success for a business continuity plan is whether or not you were able to continue your mission in the midst of whatever's happening. Right. So in business continuity, like I said, it's a whole profession unto itself. But really, what it is something happens, right? You have to figure out exactly what the most important parts of your organization are, and we call those MEFs, right? Mission essential functions. You have to identify the personnel, right? The key critical personnel, and this is where some people kind of get divided, right? Because nobody wants to say somebody else isn't essential or isn't, we don't really need what you do, but that's not what it is. It's who are the minimum number of folks that can make sure that all those MEFs continue without interruption, right? Those are called your MEPs, your mission essential personnel, and it's figuring out how to get your MEPs to continue performing your MEFs, right, while all this is happening. So while there's a disaster going on, your essential personnel will either have to go, we call it distributed, right? They'll go telework or go somewhere, or they'll have to go to what's called an alternate facility, right? That's designed to make sure that they can do that. Now, there's a lot of considerations with the alternate facility as well, and that's where you kind of start on the DoD side. You get into like classification, classified information. Don't worry, I won't divulge. But with that classification, right, you often need access to classified systems. So you need to make sure that your alternate facility has enough equipment, right, to allow your mission essential personnel to perform their MET, right? And so you kind of keep walking that dog. How are they going to get there, right? How are we going to alert and notify them? How is whatever, let's say, call it an operations center. Let's say you work in an operations center, it can't stop, right? You have a 0 to 12-hour window before your mission is degraded to a point where it's affecting operations. And so something happens, right? Someone has to keep the mission going. A team has to deploy. You have to transition the mission from the one, right, still on the ground in the burning building, transition it to the alternate location so that they can take over, and then that person can escape, right? And then once you're in the alternate location, you have to establish your communication cycles, your battle rhythm, right? You have to send reports to higher ups. Who do we need to communicate with? Internal and external stakeholders. Sure. Do we have access to all our records, right? There's a whole thing. And here is where I'll tip my own cap a little bit. I was the emergency preparedness program manager for Military Sealift Command out of Naval Station Norfolk. I was essentially a one-man EM office, right? So all those four things I talked about: plans, training, right, operations, outreach. I was doing all that, but not only for EM, also COOP, continuity of operations, right? And so I was running both of those systems, for all four of those aspects for both of those kind of professions. In that role, we were in, it was part of the hurricane exercise. The Navy does a called HUREX. They do a giant hurricane exercise, right? Yep.
I have to muster for that every time.
Yeah, so you're familiar, right? They pretend there's this hurricane coming right up the alley. It's going to whack, the east coast of Virginia. How do all the units coordinate and and right, continue the mission, right? Because DoD has most missions they can't stop, right? They have to keep going. As part of that exercise, right, where I was also, so I like to say, I was the planner, I was the coordinator, I was the player, I was the controller, so I played all the parts of that exercise in the lead up and the planning phases and execution. But we actually conducted a successful operational turnover of their battle watch. And so what we did, right, we went to our location, right, we kept, as I described earlier, right, we kept the watch, we did a transition over, and we did a successful briefing of the CUB, the Commander's Update Brief. And so because of all that, because we had a successful, execution of a continuity exercise, Military Sealift Command, a Navy Echelon 3, right? So you have the commander, you have fleet forces, and then you have the fleets. Military Sealift Command is one of those fleets. MSC is the only Echelon 3, I believe still the only, but it was definitely the first, the only Echelon 3 to pass a coup program audit, right? All the others are still red. That was, but so I tip my cap to myself there a bit. You always have to do a little bit.
That is quite an achievement. That is awesome.
And that's what kind of paved the way for me to get this position at NATO,
Right.
I'm the guy who sat in my position at MSC. He stayed in MSC but switched jobs. His name's Dan Lips. He's another mentor of mine. Extremely smart, highly motivated. Starting his own business. Him and his wife own Pilates studios. This guy's always moving.
Awesome.
But we worked together at MSC, right? Because he was part of the business continuity working group, right? So we interacted on his N6, right? And N6 is their communications, right, and IT part of the organization. Right, we got a good working relationship there. He ended up leaving MSC to do something. I ended up leaving, but then he got the position at NATO for the position I'm in now. So the position I'm in now. It is a business continuity position, but it's BIA kind of specialized, right? So
sure.
To dive a bit deeper in, as part of the business continuity process, where you identify your MEFs and your MEPs, right? The way you do that is through what's called the business impact assessment, right? So the BIA and the BPA, the business process analysis, the business impact analysis, determine what those MEPs are, how important they are, and all those little bits and pieces. How many computers, how many classified, how many telephones do we need, VTC, right? All the things that you might need in that place. The BIA determines that information, and it can be a laborious and grueling process. But he came in, and so listen to this. He came into that position. He wrote his next job up, right? Because so now I'm 1099. I was a Fed, I was a contractor. Now I'm 1099. He identified a need for a higher position to manage their BCMS, business continuity management system. So the whole thing, not just the BIA. He's like, you can't just have a BIA. You have to have a program, right? Plans, exercise, right? Outreach, operation. He wrote his next job up, stepped into it, and then pulled me into the position that he wasn't, right? And so
awesome.
we had been talking this whole time, right? Stayed in a good community. He's like, you really kicked ass at MSC. He's like, I want to bring you on board. I want to put you in here. And I was actually at a point where, I was with HasAdapt, right? But HasAdapt is it's not a money-making organization yet. It's really a labor of love from these college students, from master's students from Oregon who wanted to develop an application. I was supporting them as a federal kind of program strategist specialist. Really, it was just consulting them on sort of like, how do you get this program to a point where you can communicate it, right, to others in a way that they understand, people in the EM world, right? What am I looking for? How much is it going to cost? What is it providing? Right? Why would I pay for this? What is the value here? Sort of organize.
Sure.
What is our objective? Right? Helping them build their reports and things like that. But I wasn't making money. I'd been out of work for a little while. So my relationship with Dan, was so good that he'd been building this process to do that thing where he wrote his job and pulled me in. That had been in the works for over a year. So he helped pull me in. And so that's another part of the veteran, how do I maximize my post-military career is networking, right? Networking.
I tell that to young kids all the time. I tell that to everyone. I sat with my daughter and a group of her friends last weekend, and I said, look, the one thing you all need to be doing all the time is networking. I said, look, I know LinkedIn seems like a cliche and everything, but it's actually invaluable. I meet people on there all the time. I start conversations, you put them in your pocket, and you develop relationships, and you get to know people. You look at other profiles and see what are the people who are in blank position. That's what I want to do. What training do they have? What education do they have? Not necessarily where did they go to school, but what are their little courses and certificates that they have? What makes these people stand out from the crowd? So networking and talking to people, just reaching out, say, hey, I'm this person. This is what I'm trying to do. Do you have any advice? And and then you start a conversation. And so networking is huge. This project has been a huge lesson in networking for me. I thought I was doing it correctly until I figured out I actually need to talk to people. Just browsing a profile isn't enough. So this has been a good experience. But you said you were when you moved over to NATO, this is the position that you're working for. What was his name?
Dan Lips.
Okay, so when you moved over there, tell me a little bit about that role and what what your daily tasks are.
Sure. So I'm still new, right? I just
Yep.
started in July. So how do I put this for public? NATO is trying to establish, right, a verifiable, they want to call it world-class BC program. And there's a lot of work left to do. And really, as I kind of alluded to earlier, right, identifying exactly what the mission is kind of the first step. And so we're actually working through that right now, right? And so what Dan had done was gone through the mission functions and tasks book for NATO and extracted all MFTs. Typically, they say, hey, this is the position, chief of staff. Chief of staff does X, Y, and Z, right? And so that's what we call a MEF, right? How does he do that? And so what we're doing right now, my project for the last month has been to lock that in. And so my proposal, which was accepted and which we're running with, was, they had already submitted the MEFs to the different offices. Sure. They had sent it back, but they hadn't been scrubbed, right? And so what I did was I went through all these, probably like 400 or 500 MEFs, right? And I looked at their evaluation to see if it seemed accurate. Right now, I don't know NATO,
400 or 500.
Yeah, typically, and that's, that had already been scrubbed probably from a much larger list. Wow. A lot of these projects are pretty daunting, but it's all the different offices, right? 1,000 people that work in NATO, right? All different types of jobs. And so I go through and I say, okay, does this sound, the task has to relate to what's called the core outputs or their major MEFs, their primary MEFs, their PMEFs, the big ticket items, right? Does it support, core output 1, 2, or 3? Does it do it directly? Does that task support that directly? Or is it what we call an essential supporting activity? It doesn't do the task directly, but it supports the people who do. So you think of things like payroll, right? Like IT is one. Like IT is one of the most critical things that happens. But unless you're like a computer company, it's typically not the mission, right? IT enables the mission. So that's how you kind of categorize those, sure, whether or not they were accurate. I scrubbed all these MEFs. And I'm going back to each of these offices, right? Because we have kind of a short timeline here. I came in on a short window for this. But I was like, what we should do is get all these people in all these offices to sign off on my edits, right? And I can't tell these people what's essential. It's not my job. I say, is it essential? And I challenge their assumptions on some things. And usually people like that because it makes the list smaller. And you want a smallish list, if you can, A, to be accurate, but B, because the BIA is coming. And that's a huge effort. Right. But yeah, so I'm getting all these people's buy-in, right? I'm letting them know, I'm like, hey, we're going to submit this in the tasker tracker. The tasker tracker is official, right? Once Cause signs it, Cause, the chief of staff. Once Cause signs it, this becomes, a commandment, right? So here's your opportunity to weigh in on it. And by the way, you can't complain after because I gave you this opportunity, right? And so, and I got a green light on that. And so that's what I've been doing. And I'm working through and getting all those proofs right up through their DCAUs, their deputy chief of staff at the directorates level. That I'm going to put it all in a big list, send it to Cause, get it signed. Now I can take that from the BIA and be like, hey, you guys said that this was mission essential. Well, now we have to figure out who, what, when, where, why, how exactly, how long can we live without it, right? What materials, right? That's the BIA. And it's tough because business continuity is often what we call an additional duty as assigned. Sure. Somebody has a job and they're like, oh, by the way, you're going to do the business continuity piece for this office. So they already have a day job. It's probably not written in their position description. It's a lot of work and they just don't want to do it. Right. And so you're kind of fighting those battles as you're trying to do your job, my job, which is get the information. So having the policy that says thou shalt, right, is key. Yes. And it also helps you communicate, be like, hey, like your leadership has determined that this is essential. I'm trying to help you guys make sure you can continue your mission, which you say is essential. Oh, and by the way, organizations are constantly restructuring, downsizing, realigning, streamlining. It helps to be on this list, right? So you have to figure out those talking points with individuals. And it can be a tooth pull. It's not always fun. It's not glamorous. It's a lot of like realigning the mess, but you have to, that's part of the job. Right. Yes. And the victories, like having that sort of tip of the cap, right, for the only echelon 3 having passed a coup program audit, which is extensive, right? It covers all the things, all right, FCD1, FCD2, the federal continuity directives, right? All of them. That's basically what the Navy did in their program. They read FCD1 and 2, slapped the Navy sticker on it and said, do this. which is great, right? That makes the job easier.
Right.
But that when you get a win like that, those help you personally feel like you're doing something. So that's, that's
as a federal government employee, I understand the bureaucracy and the constant changes and getting other departments or agencies to work cooperatively together. So I understand that. And just wrapping things up a little bit, I'd like to touch on AI and how you see AI as a tool in this field. Not even necessarily with NATO, but AI and any of the new technology advancements that we've seen within the past year or two. Are you seeing any of that in the field, even at HasAdapt or prior to that, especially in EM? And then how are they applying some of those tools?
There's a lot to unpack there as well. What I see people, so you got to think of the government as different than the private sector, right? So anytime you consider a tool like AI, it has to be bounced against the proprietary government systems, and it also has to worry about like classification standards, right? And what the aggregate of that information can do, right? As we all know, for OPSEC, right, you can pull bits and pieces of information together. So the government's going to be behind the private sector adopting it. I think, and most professional institutions are generally reluctant to change, but I think AI, the younger generation of EMs, I think is going to be broadly supportive in sort of a public safety sense. What AI is really good at doing is taking huge data sets and extracting good information from it. It's also really good at sort of prepping reports and documents. Hey, give me an outline, right, of a occupant emergency plan for a facility. You know what I mean? And it can help build that, so you're not like starting from scratch or trying to build something in Excel or Word, which is a huge pain in the ass. That's what it's good for. But there are some inherent dangers there. I think overall it's a good thing. I think it will work within the field. One concern is you don't want it to replace sort of people being able to do those tasks.
Yeah.
And you have to worry about AI hallucination, right? So AI, it doesn't know how to disagree with you.
Right.
It doesn't do that. And if it doesn't have an answer, it will make one up, right? So you use it as a base, use it as a start, but you really have to look at it from and I'm sure you've done it from reading reports from your subordinates, right? Is this accurate? Is this true? So and the Army, right? How many times again? Yeah. So did you call these people? Is that the right number? Is that the person? Did he say that? Right. And then they're like, oh, well, I just no, go flush it out. Like it escapes me. One Charlie, right, at dive supervisor school, op order week.
Sure.
The most painful week. One of the most painful weeks of my life, op order week. But those really challenging assumptions and putting together viable plans, right? Those skills are still going to be in demand. So I don't think AI is going to replace. I think AI will enable, and it can really do a lot of good. But you still have to do the work of being able to know and understand what is critical, right? What is accurate, what is right, what is useful. And like I said, I can't disagree with you, and it will make stuff up. So you have to make sure that you're not putting bad information out there.
Right. When I engineer my prompts, I typically feed it a couple core documents that I need it to reference. I'll also set the guardrails, and it's funny because you can ask it a question and it will come back at you with something so positive, and it's oh, that's a great idea. No, well, hang on a second. No, I need an evaluation. I found some prompts online that you enter before you enter a question, so it kind of forces it to assume an identity or personality that's basically brutal. So I actually make sure that I'm doing that before I actually write any prompts. So but thank you very much for coming on with us today. You did a great service for the listeners, and I appreciate your time.
And as I said earlier, I was humbled and honored to be invited. I really had a great time as well. It's kind of walking that dog through my life, and it's been a while since I've kind of put those pieces together. So it's a cathartic experience for me as well. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
All right.